On Friday's show, I gave my take on how Bernie Sanders could chart a path to victory heading into the early primary states. As he works to keep his momentum up on the campaign trail, the Vermont senator's polling numbers continue to show him at the top of the pack.
So where does Bernie have to do moving forward and secure wins in Iowa and New Hampshire? Here to break it all down for us is Bernie Sanders' campaign National Press Secretary, Briahna Joy Gray. Briahna, welcome back to the show.
Great to see you.
Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Okay, so tell us a little bit about what you guys are thinking. I think Bernie is now in the second place in the RCP national polling average. He's doing pretty well, I guess, in Iowa and New Hampshire, poised in that second place strategy. What is the plan to get up to the top?
So in the most recent polls, we're tied for first in Iowa, which is a first, and we're tied for first nationally as well, which is something that really goes against some of the narratives that we've seen out there, right? Yeah. We're still getting articles that talk about other candidates surging when they have in fact declined, and us maintaining when we are in fact surging. We've had a slow and steady increase over time, and it's no surprise, right? When you look at the enthusiasm on the ground, the number of volunteers we're able to turn out, the number of doors we're able to knock, and that's how you're getting these huge presences at our rallies, and the kind of enthusiasm that we saw, for instance, last Thursday at our big rally at Morehouse in Atlanta.
Yeah, how did that go for you?
It was amazing. I mean, I talked to a couple of reporters there who obviously aren't affiliated with the campaign and have no bones in this, who said, I honestly haven't seen this level of enthusiasm at any other rally that I've covered for any other candidate. And I said, well, you should stick around because this isn't even the most lit one we've had so far. But you can't manufacture it. I mean, you can't manufacture the relief, the enthusiasm that you get when telling a group of college students who know more than anyone else, black students, particularly black women, particularly people at HBCUs, know what it is to live a life under the anvil of college debt. Right. And to be the only candidate in the race who's offering full debt cancellation, capping of interest rates going forward at 1.88%, and free public colleges and universities, and free HBCUs, even private HBCUs. I mean, that is a sincere emotional reaction you're seeing from people who understand firsthand what it means to live under that yoke.
It's really interesting because there's an article in this morning from the New York Times talking about African-American voters and how black voters have basically are sticking either with Joe Biden or the younger people all want disruption and are with Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren. We've seen that in the own data that we've looked at on the show, younger black voters all overwhelmingly supporting Bernie. And really, it was funny because the Times is kind of grappling with the pushing of identity politics. Like, why aren't they supporting people who are in the race and who are black? I mean, as a woman of color who represents the Bernie Sanders campaign, maybe you could explain it to them.
Yeah, well, look, I think that for legitimate historical reasons, black voters tend to want to back the person who they see as most electable, right? Because we oftentimes have the most to lose, or among the most to lose, from a candidate like Donald Trump or other conservative candidates coming into office, right, who have attacked our voting rights, for instance, in pretty significant ways that have a long-term tail on it. So it sometimes takes a little bit longer to convince people that you are the person who can actually take out someone like Trump. And that's especially true when the media doesn't necessarily cover all of the ways in which you are the most electable, isn't covering the fact that you are in the lead, isn't giving a voice to the fact that you are leading on a number of policies that are of particular importance to the black community. So we saw this at the debate, right? There were questions about student debt that weren't ever thrown to Bernie Sanders. Yeah. There were questions about criminal justice that were never thrown to Bernie Sanders, despite him having the most comprehensive criminal justice platform out there. Instead, he got two direct questions, I think one of which was, would you negotiate with the Taliban? And the other one was about people chanting things at his rallies. Nothing substantive.
The first one was okay. The Taliban answer was actually pretty good.
I mean, he answered it beautifully.
Yeah.
It was, that whole debate, in fairness, it wasn't just bad vis-a-vis Bernie. It was just bad overall. I wanted to ask you specifically how you are thinking about the early states. Do you think that it's must-win for Senator Sanders to either take Iowa or New Hampshire or both? How are you looking at that?
Look, seeing as how the polls are looking so strong, of course, our goal is to win all of those states, right? And we're seeing that when we see how many people on the ground, how many people we're able to turn out and actually knock doors, it seems like less of a reach than it might be for other candidates, especially those of whom who think that they can throw millions of dollars in this race and win that way. When you see the true power of people power, I was just looking at some reports from the field today showing the tens of thousands of doors that were managed to be knocked over the weekend. It would be a fool's errand to ignore the fact that we can run a kind of game in these states that other people can't do. We both are more funded than other people in the race, and we can put money where money is needed needed. But we also have people power picking up the back end, and that can't be undersold.
Yeah, and so, I mean, let's talk about that and the Bloomberg thing in particular. It's got $37 million ad. I think it's out today. It's in like an ungodly number of states where nobody else can buy. That's what he's doing. That's what he's trying to play. I mean, of course, Bernie had something to say about that earlier, but just generally, why do you think it's not going to work? I really don't think it is going to work. I think he's basically flushing it down the toilet.
So think about it this way. We recently, last week, came out with the stat that we had 4 million individual donations, which is more than any candidate in presidential history at this stage in the race, and a place that we didn't get to until March at this time in 2016, right? If you were to translate the $37 million or so that are being thrown into ads by Bloomberg, that would work out to about 2 million of our individual donations, right? So that means not necessarily 2 million people, but in 2 million instances, individuals in $18 increments are deciding to put their money where their mouth is and support a candidate that reflects their worldview. That's what democracy looks like, and that is a direct contrast to what Bloomberg is doing out there. And I think that people don't take kindly to the idea of an election being bought.
Yeah. I think that's right.
I was at a few events this weekend that had a lot of Senator Sanders supporters, and many of them had watched the piece I did on Friday about, okay, here's how he could actually win. And I want to share with you, and I'm sure you've heard this too, what the concern was, which is, okay, we can see how he could get the most delegates and the largest sort of percentage point, but it's hard to imagine him with this big field getting to 51%, where he could win on the first ballot at the convention. I mean, is that something you all are thinking through? How do you think that would play out if he has the largest number of delegates, but not enough to win potentially on the first ballot?
I reflect on how the polls completely mischaracterized and misanticipated the moment in Iowa in 2016. I reflect on how they underestimated Bernie Sanders in Michigan in 2016. And here we are coming out of the gate with enormously a higher amount of name recognition, with leading with Latino voters, which is going to be crucial in states like Nevada and California, right? So I caution, obviously, I don't want to be overly optimistic,
right?
But I don't think that we are in a kind of, an overly strategic mathematical place right now. I think on the merits, on the ground, this is very gettable for us. If we keep on the trajectory that we're on, which has been, again, largely under-observed, but which has kind of spells us going forward into a place that puts us in a very strong position when
What do you tell people who watched the way the last primary went down, with the finger on the scales for Hillary Clinton with the DNC? What do you say to reassure them that the process will be fair and that if he should be the winner, he will be the nominee?
We can be cautiously hopeful that the process will be fair. Reforms were made after 2016, which helped the process to be more fair. I think there are a lot more eyes on the process and a lot more skepticism than there was going into it last year, or last time around.
Yeah, I think that's true.
So that will help. But additionally, it's just a lot harder to put your finger on the scale when there's someone who is coming into the race in a leadership position and coming into the primaries in a leadership position.
Yeah. So last question for you, which is one of the things I've seen from a lot of the people who support Senator Sanders. They're curious as why he doesn't draw bigger contrasts when he's on the debate stage. He treats a lot of these debates like campaign rallies. He gives his speech, but he's not actually debating a lot of the people on the stage. Why do you think that is? And will we be able to see some more contrast as the race continues? Particularly, the hot months of Iowa are not very far away.
I would push back against the premise a little bit. We did see at the last debate some pretty strong contrast being drawn with Joe Biden, for instance, right?
Yeah. He has no problem doing that, but I'm saying, look, Elizabeth Warren is also in this race, and it's a zero-sum game.
Right. Well, some of it does have to do with how much airtime one gets
right.
as well.
Fair enough.
But I do think that you're going to see more of that going forward. You saw his pretty straightforward comment about Bloomberg. And as we're going around the country, as his surrogates are going around the country, we certainly aren't shying away from it at all. I don't know if you saw Senator Nita Turner's remarks when we were down in Atlanta last week talking about Mayor Pete. The contrasts are being drawn in different contexts, in contexts where people feel different audiences are comfortable with different levels of antagonism. There are a lot of people who don't want to see people kind of snipe at each other, who feel like they want the issues elevated over personal attacks. And sometimes it's better to do these things, I think, in different kinds of context.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that wasn't the last question. The last question is the controversy that is sweeping the internet over Smooth Bernie.
Smooth Bernie.
All right, I don't know if we've got the graphic. We had it for an earlier segment, but free being, there we go. Free Beacon.
Look at that.
With
Something's
the
going on here.
enhanced picture there, Senator Sanders was looking great. The hair was combed. He was looking fresh-faced at the debate this week, and everyone wants to know what's going on. I will say I did some of my own digging and found that he had gotten a question. This is hilarious. Cosmo had actually asked him about his skincare routine.
Yes, I love
to
that
which
interview.
his answer was, I put something on. I got something. The doctor gave me something years ago. I put it on. I'm not quite sure. So, do you want to reveal here the senator's skincare regimen,
Right.
or
what is
really going? What the truth is behind Smooth Bernie?
I love that I'm working for a candidate for whom controversy is looking good.
Yeah, right.
on the debate stage.
That, whoever did the makeup,
Yeah.
you know,
I was gonna say,
great
I was just like, good makeup.
Yeah.
And also the ability for like good lighting to fill in crevices is extraordinary. Almost
me.
more than makeup.
Trust me, we know. It's a wonderful thing.
Look, I'm just glad people think that Bernie looks fit.
Yeah, there you go. All right. Thank you, Briahna.
Great to see you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next on Rising, why are conspiracy theories on the rise?
That was a good segue, actually. Journalist Matt Taibbi explains and tells us the danger of their increased prevalence when Rising continues.